Hi guys, it's Michelle with Deception Bytes, and I'm picking up from where we left off with the Q-anon post, but I've got to preface this by saying something today, because I know we're behind. I'm fully aware of that, but reasons like this are why I'm behind, because tonight I've got some stuff that I have never heard before, and that's saying something, because I'm into this stuff all the time, not just since Q, but I've been looking into all this stuff for many years. So that's saying something. I've never heard of this, and it's going to take me a while to get through that. I've got about 3 to 4 hours tonight to devote to it, to getting this down on videos, and I'm praying that the Lord help me to communicate this in a way that you're able to receive it, because there's just so much here. And even as I'm approaching this tonight, I'm thinking, okay, I still feel scattered with it all, because there's just so much and there's so many connections here. But I'm going to label these videos that kind of belong together as red. They'll be red somewhere in the title, and you'll know that these belong together. And yes, we're going to go down some rabbit trails tonight. And I'm sorry, but that's just the way it has to be. Because if you really want to know what this stuff means and where it's going, we have to look at this stuff in depth. I understand that Q posted some new stuff today, and that's wonderful, and I'll get to it in time. But for now, I really want to understand all of this stuff and not just skim over it. That is what the whole message of Q is. He's wanting us to look into it and research it. He's not just dropping this stuff and moving on to the next thing. He is, because there's a huge amount of stuff to be researched. But if everybody's just reading his posts and nobody's doing the research, that's not accomplishing much, because we're not understanding it. And I'm just hoping that, I'm not saying I'm the only one. I'm not the onlyest one. I know that. There's awesome people out there that are doing videos and doing some really great stuff. But for now, I need to take these posts as they come and do them in depth. That's my thing. I feel my contribution to all this. So if you've never shared one of my videos, this might be a good one to share, because there's a lot of information here, and not just in this one, because there's absolutely no way I will be able to cover it all in one video. There's just no way. I don't know how many hours worth of stuff I have here. I'm just going to start going, and I'll break it, at about the hour mark and go to the next one. But there's a lot of stuff here. I'm just saying that, and I'm going to get into it now, and hopefully I'm going to be able to communicate this in a manner that makes it understandable. So, December 4th, this is where we left off right here. And this is kind of the end of this kind of stuff, and then we jump into something else. And that is what I'm referring to, not this particular one. But December 4th, Q said, date Peter Comey cleared Weiner emails, and that was 11/6. And I've linked to the article about that, but I'm not going to go out to it, because we already know that, the Weiner emails were cleared. So, and then date wife was promoted was 10/14/16, and that's Peter Strzok's wife, Melissa Hodgman. She received a promotion at the Securities Exchange Commission as Assistant Director in Security Exchange Commission's Enforcement Division on October 14th, 2016. Q asks, do you believe in coincidences? Well, no. Q has told us over and over again that there are no coincidences as far as this stuff is concerned. So, no, it's not a coincidence. And he signs off Q. Now, since we did this last time, actually, we went over this last time, because this is the second sort of time Q has posted this. I'm not going to go too in depth with this, but I have noticed that I missed something here, and it's this one, and this is where we need to start, and then I'll skip over this and we'll go to the next one, because this kind of, he posted these, I'm doing them in the order he posted it, but actually it would have been made more sense if he had posted this down here and then this, but hey, I'm not Q, and I don't have the mind of Q. So here we go. December 4th, 2017, this is what Q says. red_red. Remember? He's saying remember because on November 25th, he posted a bunch of code, and at the top of the code, which is called a stringer, he posted red_red. So he's saying remember, and I'm pretty sure that's why he's saying remember, because it's not the first time he's posted that. Then he says Hussein AIDS video, and I wasn't sure because I hadn't watched the Jimmy Kimmel. I'm really not a TV person, so I wasn't aware that he had done this video. But we're going to go out and take a look at it right now. And then Q asks, hidden message? Well, I don't know. We'll see what you think. So let's go out and take a look at that now. I'm sorry if there's a little bit of an echo on my microphone, but in order to be able to pick up this input from YouTube and not just my screen, I've got two inputs here. I've got my computer input and my microphone input, and so if it's echoing, I apologize. I may go out once we're done with this and shut that off. All right, so let's go back and see what this is all about.
Pardon me a second, I have to take a quick call. Hello? What's that? Oh, for real? Wow, thank you. I just got a very exciting call from Atlanta. If you enter to win one of our many Celebrity Omaze experiences right now, Coca-Cola, one of the great partners that supports Red, will match every dollar you bid during the show tonight, up to $1 million. So go to omaze.com right now. And Coke, as you can see here, will double the amount of good you do.
The other thing, I just want to point this out. Sorry to interrupt this, but notice in the background you have all these squares that actually are forming crosses. Just pay attention to that because it may or may not be significant, but I know that these things are not usually coincidences. So let's go ahead and listen.
That's an example right there.
Coke adds life, I guess. And saves lives.
Well, thanks to Coca-Cola. And if that doesn't convince you to help, maybe this gentleman can. He is currently unemployed. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, President Barack Obama.
Hi, everybody. This World AIDS Day, everyone has a role to play. Jimmy Kimmel's not just a talk show host, he's an activist. Bono's not just a musician, he's ringmaster of a home shopping extravaganza. And me, I'm not just a former president. I'm a husband who hasn't done his Christmas shopping yet. Fortunately, Red is making my part easy. I know we live in a time when cable news and our Twitter feeds can make it feel like cynicism is everywhere. But when it comes to the fight against HIV/AIDS, there's some genuinely good news to share. For the first time in history, more than half of all people living with the virus are on life-saving medication. Since the peak of the virus, AIDS-related deaths have been cut in half. Today, more than 20 million people around the world are on antiretroviral drugs that make it possible to live, work, and raise HIV-free children. It sounds like a miracle, but it's not the result of mysterious forces or chance. It happened because countless people, working for years, chose to make this progress. Some deployed great wealth and influence. Some, Democrats and Republicans alike, held public office. But far more were simply citizens, organizers, activists, doctors and nurses, scientists, and above all, courageous people living with HIV who led the fight to spare others the anguish of this disease. That's how progress happens. When we reject cynicism and pessimism in favor of a relentless optimism that says however long it takes, however lonely the fight, each of us can make a difference. That's what I believe. That's why I'm here tonight, and I'm asking you to join us. And if you do, you can pilot Air Force One for a day.
We can't do that anymore, sir.
No? We can't do that anymore?
No.
Okay. If you do, I'll share our files on the aliens.
We can't do that. Can't do that either.
No? We can't can't do that either? But I have them. They're in my desk right now.
Still classified.
All right, fine. Sorry, Jimmy. You can't see those. But the rest of you watching tonight can help us end this pandemic once and for all. You can help us win this fight. You can help us change lives and write a future full of progress and hope. So let's all get to work. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, President Obama.
Okay, so that's that. And if you heard something like a cat meowing in the middle of that, that was my cat. I think she's hungry, but she shouldn't be. So I think she'll be fine until this video is over, because I'm not going to stop it for her. Anyway, so let's go back, because we have not yet. Now, it's interesting because my thoughts on this, when I saw it, I thought, okay, well, that can't be a bad thing, can it? And, you know, to tell you the truth, if I didn't know what I know about Obama, he comes across as a likable guy. Hidden message? Well, apparently yes. And we'll get to that, because I'm not exactly sure what the hidden message is. But Q is obviously pointing out that there is one, and we're going to get into some really, really interesting stuff. So then he asks response, Twitter, roles, actions, expand your thinking, news unlocks meaning, Q. So I'm going to go on from there right now, because I'm going to get into some stuff that is, maybe you'll think it's a rabbit trail. I don't think it is, because it links directly to what he is talking about. And sorry, I skipped ahead there. Now, this one we're going to skip over. We've already done this, and we're going to go on with this red stuff. Now, he says, Q says, re-review red stringer. And I did. I still didn't understand it. It's a bunch of code. Focus on Hussein AIDS video. Okay, so let's focus on Hussein's AIDS video. Cross-reference. Date of stringer versus video. Well, the video was done 11. Actually, it was not done the 11th, the 27th. It was done the 27th. The date of the stringer versus video. The video was 11/27th, 17th, and the original stringer was 11/25. Okay, now Q says learn to decipher. Now I'm going to go down here, scroll down here, just so you can see it. And then he says news unlocks message. The news unlocks stringer code of 11/25. That's what I get from this. And then he says find the keystone. I think tonight we are going to find the keystone. I'm pretty confident that we have found the keystone, but hey, we'll see what y'all think. Now, I'm going to go down and just show you that stringer so that you're aware of what it looks like, because I know you probably don't have a photographic memory and can't just call it up. So, sorry, take me a minute to get down here. It's the 25th. Okay, that's not it, that's not it, that's not it. Hang on, there it is. See, it's right here. Red underscore, and then there's all this code, and it all means something. It all has something to do with something, and I still don't understand it, and maybe in time I will, but I understand a heck of a lot more than I did. So let's go back. I just wanted to show you that so that you can know what we're referring to. I don't want to assume anything, so I'm gonna, sorry, all this jumping around, but it's kind of necessary. Takes me forever to Okay, we're almost there. All right. Now, this is where we were. Okay. I think this is where I'm going to go out to my notes, and we'll get into a little bit of the rabbity trail stuff. December 4th, Q says, and I put this in bold so that, because it's important, Red Cross is corrupt and used as a piggy bank. Now, I happen to already know that because I did some fundraising when all those years ago when for Hurricane Mitch, and I happened to find out that only pennies on the dollar of everything that we give to the Red Cross ever goes to a victim. Most of it goes to inflated salaries and it goes internally, and a lot of it's lost and unaccounted for. Well, yeah, lost. You know what I mean by that. So, it is. Red Cross is notoriously corrupt, and we're going to see more about that. Now, he's saying future topic because there's a lot coming up. There's a lot of posts coming up about this. Okay, that's why we've got a lot of material here. Diseases. Now, this is interesting. Diseases created by families in power. Well, who are the families in power? The Rothschilds, the Soros, House of Saud, the Rockefellers. Is that what he's saying? I would assume so. He's saying diseases created by families in power. Population control plus pharma billions. Well, we know that. I mean, they create the diseases and then they create the drugs and they what do you call that? Patent the drugs. And so they make millions from the drugs that are being sold to create the diseases that they created in the first place. Now, this is a rabbit trail, and I won't get into it too much, but if you want to read a fascinating book, read Dr. Mary's Monkey. That's what it's called. There's also on YouTube several interviews with the guy that wrote that. It is a mind-boggling book. And anyway, if you want to see more about that, about diseases being created and so forth, read Dr. Mary's Monkey. Very, very eye-opening. Okay, that's it for that rabbit trail. Now, he says, think AIDS. So Q is telling us that AIDS was created. I don't think that that comes as a surprise to any of us. And then he says, future topic. And then he says, relevant. And fly, Ross, fly. Now, to me, he's hinting that maybe it's the Rothschilds, because why is he putting fly, Ross, fly right there after this? Think AIDS, diseases created by families in power. Well, who do you think of when you think of families in power? I don't know about you, but I think Rothschild, because it's, I mean, to me, that's the family. But anyway, he's already hinting to us. He's already hinting that the Red Cross, it's corrupt and used as a piggy bank. Then he says future topic. Then he's saying disease created by families in power. So to me, these two are linked somehow, right? Because obviously he wouldn't be talking about two completely opposite things in the same post. Then he says think AIDS. So Red Cross, diseases created by families in power, diseases such as AIDS, relevant. Fly, Ross, fly. Q. Okay, are you ready for to go down the rabbit hole? Because we're going down. All right, here we go. And there's a lot here, a lot. And I apologize in advance because I've got a lot of stuff to get to, and it's going to be a lot of back and forth, but it's really necessary. I'm not going to read all of these articles, but I am going to read enough of them to show you. Red Cross Federation chief vows corruption crackdown. So obviously there's corruption that's being admitted. Geneva. Reuters. The new president of the world's largest humanitarian network, the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, promised on Tuesday to crack down on corruption after a scandal over Ebola funds in West Africa. Francesco Rocca, who headed the Italian Red Cross and oversaw its role in the Mediterranean refugee crisis, was elected on Monday to lead the IFRC. He said the organization should have zero tolerance for any gray area or black hole, and its 190 national societies should adopt very strict policies. Look at the scope of this. 190 national societies. Wow. All come under that umbrella. What has happened could jeopardize our credibility. Oh, too late, Rocca. Your credibility's already jeopardized. But anyway, what has happened? Okay, last month, the IFRC said it had uncovered fraud committed during its operation to combat the deadly Ebola virus outbreak in Guinea, Liberia, and Sierra Leone in 2014-2016. The estimated losses totaled 6 million Swiss francs, including suspected collusion between IFRC staff and bank employees in Sierra Leone, fake billing in Guinea, and inflated prices and payment in Liberia. It's a huge offense to our volunteers who spend their lives and sacrifice their time away from their families and their friends, their free time, sometimes their job, to spend for humanity, Rocca said. Then someone is creating profit on their shoulders. It is something that is really unacceptable. Well, I think we would all agree with that. Rocca said that other priorities for the organization included recruiting more volunteers to help cope with bigger and more frequent natural disasters and persuading politicians to take the right decisions. Politicians were too concerned about the present and needed to think longer term to solve big problems, Rocca said. One such issue was the flow of migrants and refugees from Africa to Europe, thousands whom die every year as they try to cross the Sahara and the Mediterranean. If after 30 years people are still escaping for the same reason, perhaps we need to rethink how we have worked so far in that area of the world, he said. Now, I'm not going to go into this, way like too much, because the thing is, I'm just wanting to show a pattern here. And okay, all right, let's go back. Not there, here. Now, let's go here. Now we're talking about the Red Cross right here, but the red organization and the red_red, it's all going to tie together. Okay, so I'm trying to paint a broad picture here, but it's going to tie together, I promise you. So the Red Cross, Haiti, and the black hole of accountability for international aid. Experts said there is virtually no way to monitor how nonprofits operate, nor for governments or disaster victims to hold them accountable for mismanagement. International aid groups largely operate in a black hole of accountability, charity watchdogs have said, as fresh allegations emerged this week of the Red Cross's misrepresentation of its accomplishments after Haiti's devastating earthquake in 2010. Officials at nonprofit watchdogs were not surprised by a ProPublica and NPR investigation, which found the Red Cross had misrepresented its efforts in Haiti and delivered only a portion of the $488 million it raised to Haitians, in spite of a pledge to give 91 cents of every dollar. And that's $500 million. It's a lot of money. The Red Cross disputes the report, saying the accusations are overblown and unfair characterizations of a program beset by the challenges that all aid groups face in Haiti. But the organization has faced accusations of mismanagement before, including withholding funds after 9/11, delays of emergency supplies after Hurricane Katrina, and disarray and selective relief after Hurricane Sandy. Indeed, members of Congress are currently waiting for the results of an audit into the American Red Cross disaster relief efforts. As experts said, there are virtually no ways to monitor how nonprofits operate, nor for governments or disaster victims to hold them accountable for deliberate or accidental mismanagement. Accidental, yeah, right. There's a lot of waste and abuse that's allowed to go on just because there's no accountability, said Daniel Borochoff, president of the nonprofit Charity Watch. They exist in a black hole of accountability, he said, especially in the realm of international grants. Tobias, I'm not sure how to pronounce his last name, a professor of development economics at Florida International University, said that nonprofits have much weaker disclosure rules compared with for-profit or government organization, and that a huge gap divides donors from their programs. And might I just add here that that is why a lot of these people like Obama and McCain and Clinton's form nonprofit corporations. That's why, because there is a big black hole of accountability, and we know that. So just had to throw that in there. When any kind of government program screws up in the U.S., you'll very quickly hear about it. That's not necessarily true. But when it comes to foreign aid, the people there have virtually no way to tell the taxpayer or donor whether the money reaches them or whether they're satisfied with services. It's very difficult to hold these organizations to account in a political sense or with their purse strings. In 2013, Congress opened an investigation into the Red Cross, prompted by the problems of earlier disaster relief programs. Jennifer Ashley, a spokesperson for the Government Accountability Office, said that the agency's audit will look at the nature and extent of the Red Cross disaster-related services and what external oversight of those services exist. She said that the agency expects to complete the report this summer. A spokesperson for Iowa Senator Chuck Grassley, who has for more than a decade called for clearer accounting of Red Cross finances and programs, said the senator is concerned about the latest report. The issues described in the Red Cross report, such as lack of Haitian staff, an inability to navigate Haitian law, and a lack of expertise, were almost textbook examples of problems that entangle foreign aid work. I can't pronounce that name, sorry. They just had accumulated so much money earmarked for Haiti that they essentially started doing development work that they were not prepared for. You would think that good charities want accountability. Because other groups are doing bad things and it would make them look better, but they often don't want to tell you what specifically they're distributing. Watchdogs and investigators take particular issue with how aid organizations often report their spending in broad, vague categories such as housing and shelter and medical supplies. Those categories can variously lump together everything from temporary camps and housing repairs to tissues and snacks. We're not looking for an itemized receipt, said Sandra Minuti, vice president of another industry watchdog, Charity Navigator, but there should be greater level of detail than they have given. It really goes beyond the Red Cross. We don't really know overall who's doing what and how resources are best used and whether serious needs can be taken care of. Now, I'm not going to get into all of this because there's lots more to cover, but the thing is, in Haiti, what was it? I think they built, like, with $500 million, they built 6 houses. Like, are you kidding me? I mean, just absolute, complete and utter corruption. And that ties in with the Clinton Foundation too, obviously. Because they were big movers and shakers in the whole Haiti fiasco. So let's go back because I got lots more here to cover. Now, red.org. Okay, we all know who Bono is. Bono, I'm sorry. Even as I said that, I thought, that's not right. I'm not one of his fans, so that's, but anyway, Bono. Sorry. Bono. Anyway, excuse me. He originally founded a nonprofit called One. Well, that organization was in hot water because very little of what was raised ever went to the things that it was being raised for. Sound familiar? Now, after founding that, he is one of 2 founders of red.org. Now, red.org is what we were just viewing on the Jimmy Kimmel. That's when, they were talking about Coke, matching donations and things like that. Now, red.org, basically, there's a shopping component to it. And if you shop and buy certain things, part of that or a portion of that goes to AIDS research or AIDS, I think it goes to AIDS research if I'm not mistaken. So, to eliminating AIDS. So, he is one of the founders of this, but that kind of raises my eyebrows right away, because his charity one was plagued by corruption. So let's just go out here now, take a look at this. Celebrity do-gooder Bono, it's not, see, now I can't remember how to pronounce it again. Anyway, I don't know why I'm having a hard time with that tonight, but I am. Can't be happy about this. The nonprofit he is raising millions of dollars for is plagued with fraud. As much as 2/3 of grants donated to celebrity-supported global fund to fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria have been lost in corruption, the Associated Press found. 2/3. 2/3. Wow. Have been lost in corruption. What exactly does that mean? Where is it? Who has it? The findings are a major blow to the U2 frontman's goal for Product Red, the global charity brand he co-launched that donates a large portion of its proceeds to the organization to fight and raise awareness about AIDS. Forged documents and improper bookkeeping indicate that a large percentage of money in the $21.7 billion development fund was lost or embezzled. Investigators told the Associated Press, and so far the Inspector General's office has only examined a fraction of the $10 billion spent since the organization began in 2002. The Product Red logo can be found on products by Converse, Apple, Nike, Hallmark, and others. Gap advertises that the clothing line donates 50% of its products from Product Red branded swag directly to the Global Fund. So, interesting. When you buy a Product Red product, the company gives money to buy pills that will keep someone in Africa alive. Oh, does it? Does it really? Bono said in a statement in 2006 when the brand launched, "The idea is simple. The products are sexy and people live instead of die." Well, it sounds wonderful. It really does. Like, if I believed that I could buy something and part of that money could go to support somebody and keep somebody alive in Africa, well, why wouldn't I do that? I would. But that's not what's happening. That's not what's happening. And it's obvious. Okay. An investigation into the nonprofit found that 67% of money raised for an anti-AIDS program in Mauritania was squandered, as was 36% of funds for a program to fight tuberculosis and malaria in Mali. 30% of money spent on African country Djibouti was allegedly lost or pocketed. By whom? Who's pocketing this money? Where's it going? UN Secretary General Kofi Annan, French First Lady Carly Bruni Sarkozy, and Microsoft's Bill Gates backed the organization as well, with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation forking $150 million a year. The Global Fund is hailed as an alternative to the bureaucracy of the United Nations. Currently, the fund is putting a freeze on donations to programs that were discovered to be corrupt and demanding that misspent money is returned. Right. Well, if they don't know where it went and if it was embezzled, or how do you get that back? Seriously, how do you get that back? Like, people who embezzle money and are caught, do you think that they ever really get that money back? They don't. I mean, it's very rare. My gosh. They must think that we're all idiots. They really must. The messenger is being shot to some extent, fund spokesman John Linden told the Associated Press. We would contend that we do not have any corruption problems that are significantly different in scale or nature to any other international financing institution. What? International financing institution. Is that what they are? An international financing institution? I thought they were a charity. I thought they were helping AIDS patients. Yeah, well, that doesn't say anything anyway. By saying, that's like Barack Obama saying, well, I'm not any more corrupt than Hillary. Well, that's not saying anything. That's just my opinion. So, okay, so now we know that red.org, it's corrupt. It's part of Bono's, or Bono. How do you pronounce his name? Bono. It's Bono. Yes. Gosh. So let's go back to, I know you probably think I'm an idiot because I can't pronounce that, but I really don't follow these people, and I don't watch TV, so I never hear it pronounced really. I'm just not a TV person. I read, so, okay. Now, the Red Cross has been for many decades and remains today the largest blood bank in the country. In 1982 and especially 1983, when it would have been possible to contain the outbreak or at least stop the spread of the disease through infusions of infected blood, major blood banks led by the Red Cross opposed national testing of blood for HIV. Yeah, they sure did. And we're going to go out and take a look at that, if my computer cooperates. I'm going to close some of these down so that we can, well, okay. The right-wing scandal-ridden charity that isn't really a charity. The truth about the Red Cross. And don't necessarily think that because I'm linking to any certain website that I agree with everything they say, any more than if I link to CNN, I believe everything they say. I don't. So just, but this stuff, it's just, there's too many examples of it, and there's too many places that are reporting this that, I mean, it's a fact. The Red Cross is very corrupt. For many people, the American Red Cross is the embodiment of life-saving. Its bold red emblem, gosh, what is wrong with me tonight? Too much Diet Coke. It eats holes in your brain. Its bold red emblem is imprinted on the sides of the vehicles that appear at natural disasters, storms, or fires to take care of the survivors. Millions of Americans donate blood or hard-earned pay to the organization each year, or during special appeals like after the Gulf Coast hurricanes. And you know how they'll have it, text whatever, send $10 to whatever. And a lot of people do that because when there's a natural disaster or something and people are seeing other people suffering, naturally, it's human nature. You want to help that person. And the first thing that pops into most people's head is, oh, the Red Cross, they help them. But unfortunately, they don't. And I've been in a hurricane and I've seen firsthand what the Red Cross doesn't do. So, but as Joe Allen reveals, the real story of the Red Cross isn't nearly as noble and humanitarian as the image, and you can say that again. In recent years, the image of the Red Cross has been tarnished. The worst scandal came after the September 11th attacks, when it was revealed that a large portion of the hundreds of millions of dollars donated to the organization went not to survivors or family members of those killed, but to other Red Cross operations in what was described by chapters across the country as bait and switch operation. Recently, long-simmering concerns about the Red Cross disaster relief operations were expressed by Richard Walden of the humanitarian group Operation USA in the Los Angeles Times, prompting a vitriolic response by the Red Cross. But these recent scandals are nothing new for the Red Cross. In fact, the whole history of the organization is one giant scandal, stretching from its racist policies towards African Americans to its corporate mentality towards human beings. It's a tribute to the feebleness of the U.S. media and the Red Cross' powerful Republican allies that an institution with such a dubious history continues as a symbol of humanitarian leadership when it should have been replaced by a far more effective agency decades ago. The American Red Cross was founded in 1881 by Clara Barton, who became famous during the Civil War for organizing the distribution of food and medical supplies to Union Army soldiers. The Red Cross is specifically mandated, according to its congressional chapter adopted in 1905, to carry out a system of national and international relief in times of peace and apply that system in mitigating the suffering caused by pestilence, famine, fire, floods, and other great national calamities, and to devise and carry out measures preventing those calamities. The organization was also to carry out its work in accordance with the Geneva Conventions concerning the treatment of prisoners of war. Later, the Red Cross would be entrusted with control of a large part of the nation's blood supply. But who got relief after disasters has always been affected by the racism that has been part of the Red Cross's long history. For example, during the Great 1927 flood that destroyed large parts of the Mississippi Delta and Louisiana, black farm laborers and sharecroppers without a doubt suffered the most. As John Barry documents in his epic History of the Flood, Rising Tide, that's an awesome book if you want to read something awesome. It's a very, very good book. As John Barry documents in his epic History of the Flood, Rising Tide, Delta plantation owners refused to evacuate them out of the region for fear, rightly, that most wouldn't return to their miserable slave-like conditions. Gee, yeah. Would you? The Red Cross came in to provide temporary housing and food aid. What African Americans of the Delta got was prison-like camps where they were routinely beaten by white racist National Guardsmen. Food distributed by the Red Cross was given to whites first, and if anything was left, it went to black survivors. On the eve of the Second World War, the Red Cross stockpiled large amounts of blood because of techniques developed by the brilliant African American scientist Dr. Charles Drew. Drew himself became director of the Red Cross's blood bank in 1941, but resigned his position after the War Department ordered that the blood of black and white donors be segregated. Yeah. Drew called the order a stupid blunder, but the Red Cross complied and imposed Jim Crow in the blood supply. The Red Cross even initially refused to accept the donation of blood by African Americans at the beginning of the war effort, though it was willing to accept cash donations from them. Well, of course. Throughout the war, the NAACP investigated complaints by black servicemen of racist treatment by Red Cross. The Red Cross desegregated the blood supply after the Second World War nationally, but it allowed its southern chapters to continue segregating blood through the 1960s. People who think of the Red Cross as a private charity would be shocked to discover its actual legal status. Congress incorporated the Red Cross to act under, quote, government supervision. 8 of the 50 members of its board of governors are appointed by the President of the United States, who also serves as honorary chairperson. Currently, the Secretaries of State and Homeland Security are members of the board of governors. The unique quasi-governmental status allows the Red Cross to purchase supplies from the military and use government facilities. Military personnel can actually be assigned to duty with the Red Cross. Last year, the organization received $60 million in grants from federal and state governments. However, as one federal court noted, a perception that the organization is independent and neutral is equally vital. The leading administrators and officials of the Red Cross are almost always drawn from the corporate boardroom or the military high command. Among the past chairs and presidents of the Red Cross are 7 former generals or admirals and 1 ex-president. The current president, Marty Evans, is a retired rear admiral and a director of the investment firm Lehman Brothers Holdings. Bonnie McAlvin Hunter, the chair of the Red Cross, is also CEO of Pace Communications, whose clients include United Airlines, Delta Airlines, and AT&T, a group of companies known for their vicious treatment of workers. The Red Cross has become particularly tied up with the Republican Party in recent decades. Both McAlvin, Hunter, and Evans are Bush appointees. For her part, McAlvin Hunter has donated over $130,000 to the Republican Party since 2000. Though it is technically a non-profit, the Red Cross is run more like a profit-hungry corporation than what most people think a charity would act like. The most deadly example of this was the Red Cross criminally negligent response to the early stages of the AIDS epidemic in the 1980s. The Red Cross has been for many decades and remains today the largest blood bank in the country. In 1982 and especially 1983, when it would have been possible to contain the outbreak or at least stop the spread of the disease through infusions of infected blood, major blood banks led by the Red Cross opposed national testing of blood for HIV. The Red Cross opposition was based on the financial cost. As investigative journalist Judith Reitman wrote in her book Bad Blood, it appeared it would be cheaper to pay off infected blood recipients should they pursue legal action than to up the Red Cross blood supply. Earlier this year, the Canadian Red Cross pleaded guilty to distributing contaminated blood supplies that infected thousands of Canadians with HIV and hepatitis C in the 1980s. This scandal is a large part of why the Canadian Red Cross was removed from running the country's blood supply in the late 1990s, but not the American Red Cross. Enron-style bookkeeping, deceptive advertising, and outright theft of funds have also been a big part of the Red Cross' recent history. For years, the organization has been criticized for raising money for one disaster and then withholding a large chunk of it for other operations and fundraising. For example, the Red Cross raised about $50 million for the victims of the 1989 San Francisco earthquake in San Francisco, but it's estimated that only $10 million was ever turned over to the victims. Similar charges were made against the Red Cross following fundraising operation after the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995 and a San Diego fire in 2001. There was also a huge scandal involving the embezzlement of millions of dollars in donations in the New Jersey chapter in the late 1990s. These scandals and the potentially embarrassing political fallout from them were muffled by the media and the Red Cross political allies, but the truth couldn't be contained after September 11th. Soon after the attacks, Dr. Bernadine Healy, who was promoted president of the Red Cross in 1999, appealed for donations to help survivors and the families of those killed. In record-breaking time, the organization raised nearly $543 million, over $500 million. Then the controversy began. A congressional investigation revealed that though it had promised that all 9/11 donations would go to the victims' families, the Red Cross held back more than half of the $543 million. During congressional hearings, Representative Billy Tauzin, who is a Republican from Louisiana, soon to become a lobbyist for Big Pharma, declared, "What's at issue here is that a special fund was established for these families. It was specially funded for this event, September 11th, and it is being closed now because we're told enough money's been raised in it, but we're also told, by the way, we're going to give 2/3 of it away to other Red Cross needs." Healy was forced to resign, and her successors promised to allocate all of the money to September 11th survivors and their family. The Hurricane Katrina catastrophe on the Gulf Coast has revealed the same old problem with the Red Cross. In late September, the organization was ordered out of a suburban Atlanta relief center because, according to the New York Times, its application process had resulted in long lines and the group had made false promises of financial payments. In an even more bizarre incident in Chicago, students were turned away from volunteering for a multi-agency relief center because they refused to sign a loyalty oath to the U.S. government. Some more scrutiny of the Red Cross is beginning to take place. As Richard Walden of Operation USA wrote in Los Angeles Times, its fundraising vastly outruns its programs because it does very little or nothing to rescue survivors, provide direct medical care, or rebuild houses. Walden noted, and the Red Cross now confirms, that the organization had raised $1 billion in pledges and gifts for hurricane relief. He also revealed that FEMA and the affected states are reimbursing the Red Cross under pre-existing contracts for emergency shelter and other disaster services. Excuse me. Hang on one second. Okay, now where was I? And other disaster services. The existence of these contracts is no secret to anyone but the American public. How many people would donate to the Red Cross if they knew all this? In the richest country in the history of the world, it is a travesty that such an organization is responsible for life-saving. We deserve so much better. Yes, we do. We definitely do. But we're just scratching the surface now. We are just scratching the surface. Okay. Let's get on with this. Now, this makes this statement by Q most relevant. Disease is created by families in power. Population control plus pharma billions. Think AIDS, thus signifying AIDS was created by Big Pharma along with other diseases such as cancer and so on. Since the AIDS epidemic was started in Africa, where black people primarily live, actually I don't believe that it was started in Africa, but anyway, we can get in. Read Dr. Mary's Monkey. That's all I have to say. The following statement proves there is racism along with blood preference, and there definitely is racism, and likely DNA screening within the Red Cross. Don't know about that, but it's possible. Okay, and here it's just talking about what I've already gone into there with the flood, the history of the flood in the book Rising Tide, and what happened with the black population, which is absolutely outrageous. Yeah. Okay. Notwithstanding, the future does indeed prove the past. If the relief by the Red Cross is any indication, where after the Haiti earthquake, Haiti is primarily a black country, a total of 6 houses were built after the public donated $500 million. The Red Cross wasted $125 million on internal expenses, proving that the non-profit group is nothing more than a charity front to launder money. If one doubts the true intentions of this organization, then perhaps an explanation as to why they were asking for donations rather than helping people during Hurricane Sandy is warranted. Now, let's go out to this. I'm just trying to lay a foundation here, and for what we're going to get to. But all this Red Cross, it's all tied in. Donating to charity, especially in a time of crisis, can be intimidating. There are so many options. How do you know the organization you choose will use the money effectively? You might pick one with a history, a pedigree, a name you can trust. You might pick the American Red Cross. I'm not going to say that. During Hurricane Sandy in New York, the Red Cross was impossible to avoid. They were soliciting donations. They were in the press, calling the operation near flawless. They were doling out digital hugs. What they were not doing very much was very much actual relief work. The Red Cross operation on the ground was criticized from all sides nearly as soon as it began. And as Barry Ritholtz and Bloomberg points out, the organization declined any request to disclose how it spent the money after the storm. At one point, it went as far as claiming that its Sandy response was a trade secret. Like Kentucky Fried Chicken recipe? Like that kind of a trade secret? Where did the money go? ProPublica's Justin Elliott and Jesse Essinger and NPR's Laura Sullivan investigated the Red Cross response to Hurricane Sandy and Isaac, and the wastefulness and incompetence they found is astonishing. Some representative passages from the report titled The Red Cross Secret Disaster. During Isaac, Red Cross supervisors ordered dozens of trucks usually deployed to deliver aid to be driven around nearly empty, instead just to be seen, one of the drivers, Jim Dunham, recalls. Yeah, it's important when you're hungry and you don't have shelter and you need food to see red trucks driving around. That really offers a lot of comfort, doesn't it? The volunteers were told to drive around and look like you're giving disaster relief. Recklenberg says the official was anticipating a visit by Red Cross brass and wanted to impress them with the level of activity, he says. I hope they were impressed. During Sandy, emergency vehicles were taken away from relief work and assigned to serve as backdrops for press conferences, angering disaster responders on the ground. Handicapped victims slept in their wheelchairs for days because the charity had not secured proper cots. In one shelter, sex offenders were all over, including playing in children's areas, because Red Cross staff didn't know or follow procedures. In one case, the Red Cross had to throw out tens of thousands of meals because it couldn't find the people who needed them. He described what happened when he advised his bosses that a suggested feeding plan wouldn't help storm victims. I was quite bluntly told that they didn't care. It was the plan that was going to make the American Red Cross look the best to the local politicians, he wrote. Until the Red Cross makes some demonstrable effort to clean itself up, stop donating. There are plenty of other good organizations out there, and I agree. I know firsthand the Red Cross does nothing Nothing. I mean, they may look like they're doing, and they may do a little tiny bit, but it's pennies on the dollar, really, that go to the actual people that need it. So let's go on. Okay. Okay. Please note this article does not suggest that the hardworking staff members or volunteers of the Red Cross are not doing a good job, but rather their management is deceptive and has a different agenda as described during the experience of Hurricane Katrina. There's so much here. I really do feel it's important, though, that we understand this. I really do. So I hope you will allow me to indulge and get this stuff out. Okay. Despite huge Katrina relief, Red Cross criticized. Now, I lived in Louisiana, so I am aware of this. New York, as its hurricane relief donations neared the 1 billion mark, more than double all other charities combined, the American Red Cross is encountering sharp criticism of its efforts and mounting pressure to share funds with smaller groups. The complaints that Red Cross operations were chaotic in some places, inequitable in others, have stung deeply within an organization that is proud of its overall response to Hurricane Katrina. Are you kidding me? By far the most devastating natural disaster it has confronted on U.S. soil. It's frustrating to our thousands of volunteers out there every day, away from their families, helping people, said spokesman Devorah Goldberg. We never said we were perfect. We're trying to do our best under extraordinary circumstances. And let me just say right now, I don't believe that it's the individual people that are working out there that are the problem. It may be, but they're doing what their bosses are telling them to do. So it's generally not the underlings that are the issue, it's the overlings. So, and I don't think we need to get into this, but, I just want you to be aware of it. I will be here, all night and all day tomorrow if I read everything. So, let me go back to where I was. All right. Now, the Ebola, pandemic, that's another interesting thing. Ebola survivors want corrupt Red Cross officials prosecuted. The Liberian government has been urged to prosecute staff of the Liberia National Red Cross Society who were dismissed for misusing money sent by the International Federation of the Red Cross to combat the 2014 Ebola outbreak. International Red Cross auditors have reported the loss of over US $2.7 million misappropriated by officials who headed the LNRCS during the pandemic. The former LNRCS officials accused include former Secretary General of the LNRCS, Faya S. Tamba, and Precious C. Dennis, former head of the program. Both allegedly stole US $1 million. Also accused, okay, well, it doesn't really matter who was accused. We don't really care about that. With the recent official audit on Ebola funds to the three largest hit countries, Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, the IFRC said US $5 million, which is 3.8 million pounds of aid money, was lost to fraud and corruption during the Ebola epidemic in West Africa. Of the amount, the IFRC said US $2.7 million was lost to corruption in Liberia. Now, several Ebola survivors who spoke to the Daily Observer have called for those accused to be prosecuted to reclaim the money. Mr. Henry Toney Jr., former vice president for the Ebola Survivors Network, said that the IFRC's report of the abuse by former Red Cross officials is heartbreaking and wants the Liberia Anti-Corruption Commission to begin an investigation. This is unacceptable because while Liberians were dying in their numbers from the disease in 2014, other Liberians in top positions of responsibility were stealing funds sent to save them. If the US $2.7 million stolen was used for the appropriate purposes, more lives could have been saved, Toney said. We need justice. Our people died because a few corrupt people embezzled money meant to provide logistics, hiring, and construction of facilities for those who urgently needed them. The misuse of such money was total wickedness that inflicted wounds on many people, Toney said. Another survivor, Ms. Annie Brown, who lost both parents during the Ebola crisis, demands justice, saying those officials who were accused and forced to resign should face justice for their actions against the Liberian people. My parents died because of late response by a health worker to take them to a treatment unit because the money meant for logistics and hiring of more health workers went to individual pockets, she said. I want the government to bring such wicked people to face justice in a court of law. They have to pay for what they did to the Liberian people. We will fight for it. This is the truth. The lack of enough health workers and logistics took away many people's lives, another survivor, Ruth Davies, said. According to a BBC report, the Red Cross said that during the Ebola spread across Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, the Red Cross Federation in Geneva dispersed cash donations to the Red Cross societies in each of the 3 West African nations, altogether amounting to about US 100 million. In Sierra Leone, Red Cross staff apparently colluded with local bank workers to skim over US 2 million, while in Guinea, where investigations were ongoing, about 1 million disappeared in fake custom bills. The Red Cross expressed deep regret for the losses and said it has introduced stricter financial rules and promised to hold any Red Cross staff involved to account. So many other Liberian Ebola survivors said IFRC put pressure on the Liberian government to prosecute Liberians who reaped where they never sowed, to demonstrate its serious commitment to punish thieves in our midst in future disasters. Meanwhile, in its reorganization, President Sirleaf, who is the chief patron, appointed new officials and a board of directors to run the Liberian National Red Cross Society, with Mr. Jerome Clark as president, Ms. Seba Tamba, secretary general, and Ms. G. Ambulai Perry, director of program, among others. Okay, so there we have the corruption there. Now, regardless if humanity had wide knowledge of the blood practices currently happening in India and elsewhere, they would, regardless if humanity had wide knowledge of the blood practices currently happening in India and elsewhere, they would question the narrative of giving blood or signing donor cards in the first place. Now, I'm not sure why. There we go. Hang on one second. Let's go out and look at this. We're about to get to the really interesting stuff. Well, I think it's interesting anyway. In a sort of horrific way. Okay. Now, blood, bones, and organs. The gruesome red market. Now, let's go see what a red market is, okay? This is a good definition. What is a red market? Red market. Noun, any economic system or economy that trades primarily in human flesh or human beings. That is a red market. Buying and selling human bodies is fundamentally different than any other sort of commerce. Unlike black, white, or gray markets, red markets exist in a different category because the product being traded cannot be valued in monetary terms alone. The value of human tissue is the value of life itself, and its costs are paid in blood. Human bodies are commonly assumed to be beyond a cash value. That is why we cannot legally sell our blood or kidneys on open NASDAQ-like exchanges. Instead, bodies must be donated altruistically and exchanged as gifts without undue monetary incentives. Yet buying a human tissue poses no such difficulty. It is perfectly legal to pay a hospital for a kidney transplant or an adoption agency for a child. The discrepancy with the motivation of the donor who voluntarily gives up their flesh and the profit motive of middlemen creates a vacuum where criminal elements can sneak in. More often than not, everything operates above board, but sometimes the money creates an undue incentive to increase the supply unethically. Now, having said that, there are places in the world, some places which would shock you, Canada, where they take advantage of people that have signed donor cards and may be motivated by other motivations rather than saving the person's life. Now, I say this because I have a brother who died fairly recently, okay? And he was a trucker, and he was working, he was trucking at the time, and he was in Cleveland, and he was having trouble breathing. And he was breathing on his own and everything was fine, but they decided to intubate him, and they did it incorrectly, which caused him to suffocate. And he went into a coma and never came out. So they wanted to transfer him to Kingston General Hospital in Canada. Okay, now as soon as they wanted to do that because he's Canadian, even though he worked in the U.S., he is Canadian. So they wanted to transfer him to the Canadian health care system because it would be cheaper for insurance and everything. So they transferred him there, and I said to my mother, "No, don't let them do that." But they were like airlifting him. He was still in a coma, and I said, "Don't let them do that. They'll kill him." And my mother was saying, "Oh, Michelle, stop." Well, they did. He wasn't even there 48 hours. He was dead. And they told the family that they were going to shut off the life support. And we said no. And they said, well, if you don't let us shut off the life support, we go and we get permission, and we'll have that permission, within hours. So really, it doesn't matter what you say because we're going to do it anyway. And that's what they did. And then I guess my brother wasn't dying fast enough for them, so they gave him huge shots of morphine to slow his breathing, because once they shut off the life support, he was still breathing on his own, perfectly fine. Perfectly fine, he was breathing. But no, they couldn't have that. They needed to give him huge amounts of morphine to stop it. And they said it was to make him comfortable. But they also told us he was brain dead. Why did they need to make him comfortable if he was brain dead? Anyway, that is one story of many, 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 I could tell you, from this area of people that I know. One, my father. Now that wasn't as bad, but my stepfather, his former wife, she had cancer, and she needed dialysis, and they refused to give it to her. They said, well, you're dying of cancer. We're not going to give you dialysis. And she said, well, if you don't give it to me, I'll die. And they said, yep, that's right. So he had to stay and watch his wife just die needlessly. She could have had years left of her life, but that's the way it is here. And you may question that, and you may say, oh no, that's not true. I could tell you story after story after story that I am personally aware of because I know these people and I know the situation that happened. Now, I don't know the incentive there. The incentive there is money, because they're thinking, oh, okay, well, here's this guy that's in a coma, and we have national health care, and they're thinking, okay, well, we need the bed, because it's costing us so much money to keep this person in intensive care unit per day. Even though my brother has worked his whole entire life and paid into the system, that doesn't matter. He's sick now. We don't know if he's going to recover. It's costing us money. Oh, we're going to pull the plug. Oh, no, we're not going to let you pull the plug. Oh, you don't have a say. You don't have a say, because if you say no, we just go and we just get permission, and we do it within hours anyway. So I jumped on an airplane rushing home to Canada and was just crossing the border when my brother died, because they couldn't wait for a couple hours till his sister got there. No, they had to just pump him full of morphine to make him die quicker, because they needed that bed. I have a big problem with that. And to say that this stuff doesn't happen is a lie. It's you're living in fantasy land, as Q says, if you believe this stuff doesn't happen, because it does happen. And if you believe you've got a donor card there and they've got somebody that, needs an organ, and you're there and you're kind of touch and go, you don't think that they think about that? Absolutely they do. Absolutely. Especially in countries. I don't know if that happens in Canada. I don't know, because Canada has a different system. But in systems where people are paying, out of pocket for a transplant, you don't think that happens? Absolutely it does. And honestly, you are deceived if you think it doesn't. Okay, that's my little, I know that was an aside, but I wanted to share that with you because I think it it may open some eyes. So let me go back. Now that we know what a red market is, let's go back and read this. And where were we? Sorry, I got myself all worked up. I'm still, it's been just a couple years actually, but it feels like it was just yesterday, and it still upsets me. I mean, it's my brother. I loved him, and yeah. So, okay, here we go. All right, blood, bones, and organs, the gruesome red market. Journalist Scott Carney figures he's worth about $250,000, but that number isn't based on his savings or his assets. It's what Carney thinks his body would fetch if it were broken down into individual parts and sold on what he calls the red market. In his new book, also called The Red Market, Carney explores the shadowy but lucrative global marketplace for blood, bones, and organs. He tells NPR's Melissa Block that despite being underground, there's no question the red market is thriving. It's really hard to get an accurate figure on what the illegal market is on body parts, but I'm figuring it's definitely in the billions of dollars, Carney said. When you're at your most desperate place, the brokers come in. Just one second. As part of his research, Carney visited an Indian refugee camp for survivors of 2004's massive tsunami. Today, the camp is known by the nickname Kidney Vakam or Kidneyville because of how common it is for the women who live there to sell their kidneys. The women are just lined up, Carney says. They have their exposed midriffs, and there are all these kidney extraction scars because when the tsunami appeared, all these organ brokers came in and realized that there were a lot of people in very desperate situations, and they could turn a lot of quick cash just by convincing people to sell their kidneys. The buying and selling of organs is against the law in most every country, but Carney says the market has managed to grow thanks to the dire situations of many of its donors find themselves in. When you're at your most desperate place is when the brokers come in, Carney says. One of the women, her name was Rani, gave up a kidney because her daughter had actually tried to commit suicide because she was in a very difficult marriage. In order to treat her, the hospital needed a certain amount of cash. I think it was about $1,000. And Rani, or Rainey maybe, didn't have any money, so she did the only thing she could, which was sell her kidney because an organ broker just sort of approached her very quickly, and that's a common situation. The black gold market. In his book, Carney also delves into the marketplace for human hair, known as black gold. It is amazingly valuable, he says. The market is about 900 million around the world, and about 40% of that hair is sold for human extensions. Many of those transactions take place at the Sri Tirumala temple in southern India, where people give their hair to the god Vishnu as an act of humility. And I mean, we all know how beautiful Indian women's hair is. It's absolutely gorgeous, and it's prized the world over. I went there about 2 years ago and had my head shaved with probably about 1,000 other people, Carney says. These women came, swept up the hair, and threw it into these giant steel vats. The hair eventually gets combed and sorted and sold at auction and shipped out to international market. Hair collected in a single cut from a person's head, known as Remy, is used all over the world for hair extensions, but the shorter hair, often shorn from men, serves a very different purpose. Most of the hair that gets shorn is from men, Carney says, that gets sold to chemical companies and gets reduced to an amino acid called L-cysteine, which is used as a leavening agent in baking goods. The body as a commodity. In his book, Carney argues that part of what makes red market transactions ethically troubling is the role different social classes play in the whole operation. One of the very foundational concepts of the book is when people say, give an organ, it is always going to be a richer person, and oftentimes it's going to be a person in another country, Carney says. It's reduced to commerce so quickly. He said if he had his way, every bag of blood, organ transplant, and egg donation would be tagged with the donor's name. We have to look at the beginning of the supply chain, Carney says. We have to be sure we're getting these things ethically and not just assume that we're being ethical. And while revolving donors' right to anonymity could mean they don't donate at all, Carney says we also need to consider the alternative. You will see donations plummet, he said, but on the other hand, if you are allowing crimes on the magnitude of literally whole villages selling their kidneys, who are we protecting? And this is an excerpt from the Red Market. I weigh just a little under 200 pounds, have brown hair, blue eyes, and a full set of teeth. As far as I know, my thyroid gland pumps the right hormones into the 12 pints of blood that circulate in my arteries and veins. At 6 feet 2 inches, I have long femurs and tibias with solid connective tissue. Both of my kidneys function properly, and my heart runs at a steady clip of 87 beats per minute. All in all, I figure I'm worth about $250,000. My blood separates neatly into plasma, red blood cells, platelets, and clotting factors, and would save the life of someone on an operating table or stem the uncontrollable spilling of a hemophiliac's blood. The ligaments that keep me together can be scraped from my bones and implanted into the wounded knee of an Olympian athlete. The hair on my head could be made into a wig or reduced to amino acids and sold as a leavening agent for baked goods. My skeleton would make a striking addition to any biology classroom. My major organs, heart, liver, and kidneys, could go on to prolong the lives of people whose organs have failed, and my corneas could be sliced off to restore sight to the blind. Even after death, a determined pathologist could harvest my sperm and use it to help a woman conceive. The woman's baby would have a value of its own. Since I'm an American, my flesh sells at a premium. If I had been born in China, I would be worth much, much less. The doctors and brokers, no matter the country, who would move the pieces of my body through the market stand to make a considerable sum, much more than I could as a seller for their services. It turns out that the global law of supply and demand are as fixed in organ markets as they are for shoes and electronics. In the same way that a mechanic can swap out worn car parts for new ones and oil creaky joints to get an engine running again, a surgeon can prolong someone's life by trading broken pieces for newer ones. Every year the technology barriers get lower and the process cheaper. But there's no scrap heap for quality used human parts. Attempts to create artificial hearts, kidneys, and blood pale in comparison to the real thing. The human body is just too complex. At the moment, the body can't be replicated in a factory or lab, which means the only way we can meet the demand for body parts is to find sources of raw material in the population of living and recently deceased people. We need great volumes of human material to supply medical schools with cadavers so that future doctors have a solid understanding of human anatomy. Adoption agencies send thousands of children from the third world to the first to fill the gaps in the American family unit. Pharmaceutical companies need live people to test the next generation of superdrugs, and the beauty industry processes millions of pounds of human hair every year to quench a ceaseless demand for new hairstyles. Forget the day of grass skirt wearing cannibals on tropical islands. Our appetite for human flesh is higher now than at any other time in history. There is a strange alchemy that happens when we decide that a human body can be swapped on the open market. Most people instinctively know that what makes humans special is more than just our physical presence. From the electrons and quarks that give us mass to the complex biological structures that sustain our every breath, there is also a sense of presence which only accompanies life. For the purpose of this book and to make sense of it as I write, I give the human body the benefit of soul. Losing that soul transforms a body into a jumble of matter. Though we like to think that our bodies are sacred and above the hard scramble logic of the market, the sale of human parts is booming. Several $1 billion worth of humanity changes hands every year. With almost 6 billion people in the world, the supply is significant. There are just slightly fewer than 6 billion spare kidneys, or 12 billion if you are absolutely merciless, and about 60 billion liters of blood in the global supply. There are enough corneas to fill a soccer stadium. The only thing stopping business from grabbing the potential profits are the rights to mine the resources. Take, for instance, the market for adopted children. At the moment a family decides they want to bring in a needed child from a foreign country, they only have an abstract idea about the child's identity. In their search for the perfect baby, they refine their expectations based on the available baby market. They troll through online menus issued by international adoption agencies, read newspaper articles about desperate children in orphanages. I'm sorry, my cat is interrupting. And make difficult decisions about what particular set of characteristics will trigger the adoption. Sure, at some point the child will be a member of the family, but to actually obtain one, they will have to engage with often shady supply chain of middlemen and corruptible government officials, many of whom see children as little more than bodies. It is only after they have brought the child into their home that the child transforms from an abstraction into someone real. It doesn't matter what our moral position is on the subject. Bodies are unquestionably commodities, and yet they are uncomfortable ones. As a product, bodies aren't assembled new in factories filled with sterile suited workers. Rather, they are harvested like used cars at scrap markets. Before you can write a check and pick up human tissue, someone needs to transform it from a tiny piece of humanity into something with a market value. Unlike scrap, the piece of human body isn't measured only in dollars. It is measured in blood and in the ineffable value of lives, both saved and lost. When we buy a body part, we take on the liabilities for where it came from, both ethically and in terms of the previous owner's biological and genetic history. It's a transaction that never really ends. Now, I wanted to make you guys aware of this red market, and because it's all part of this and it's important. Now, I don't know how far to go with this because there is so much stuff in this, and I'm probably already at the hour mark. Now, okay, I'm going to go on with this, and then, actually, I think I'm going to break there, and I know it feels like I haven't really covered much of Q. But in order to understand what Q is saying, we're going to have to understand this. And let me do one more thing right here, and then we will. Then I'm going to break before we get to this part down here. But we're going to have to continue on with this red stuff, the Red Cross, and the red market, and all of that, because it's all related. And at this point, you'll just have to trust me that I know where I'm going. But I'm going to continue on just a little bit longer, and then I'm going to break it, and I'm going to do another video. I'm going to go right into another video while this is uploading and so forth. So, okay. There is a red market that exists, and essentially a body part market as well. Even hair is harvested for monetary gain. Questioning the practices of shaving one's head to support cancer, or Movember, where men grow facial hair for a cause related to prostate cancer. Here are more details on blood farmers. This suggests humans are actually being reaped, not only for their blood, but for their entire body. Now, while Q has been dropping coded intel since Halloween night, 2017, they have mentioned, they, meaning Q, whether it's a one person or a they, it's probably a group of people, but have mentioned the keystone quite often. The keystone is related to the Red Cross. Okay, so we're going to get into that when right after this ends. The next one, we're going to get into that, but I'm going to go out to this article right now. Okay. Blood farming and illegal organ selling. Blood farming is a growing healthcare and human right issue and is especially prevalent in India. This highly illegal and immoral practice involves treating human beings, often recent immigrants and individuals from other marginalized populations, much like cattle on an industrial dairy farm. Instead of milk, however, these unfortunate individuals are cruelly and systematically drained of their blood. This blood is then sold on the black market to serve a variety of medical purposes. In order to prevent escape, blood farmers imprison individuals indefinitely, often securing them around the clock with chains and padlocks. After gaining access to one of these blood farms, investigative journalist Scott Carney described it as a medical ward fit for a horror movie. His new book, The Red Market, which we just actually looked at, paints a portrait of a man who was too weak to protest as his blood slowly drained into a plastic bag on the floor. A crumpled nylon bag next to him held 5 more pints. Carney reports inside were another 19 empty bags ready for filling. Blood farming is just one facet of a disturbing international black market that buys and sells various fluids and tissues from the human body. According to a 2013 study by Global Financial Integrity, worldwide organ trafficking is big business, generating between 600 million and 1.2 billion in total annual profits. In general terms, organ and blood trafficking crime can be divided into 3 broad categories. The first is when traffickers directly force or indirectly deceive victims into unwilling donations. The second encompasses instances in which victims formally or informally agree to sell fluid or tissues before being cheated out of the funds that they were promised. The third category includes individuals who have organs or blood removed without their knowledge while being treated for other real or falsified medical ailments. In addition to preying upon immigrant populations, organ traffickers and blood farmers typically seek out migrant workers, the homeless, the illiterate, and other vulnerable individuals. A recent United Nations report identified the international organ trade as a highly organized criminal industry that involves a host of offenders, including recruiters, transporters, contractors, and a wide variety of medical professionals. Of the 106,879 global organ transplants that occurred in 2010, as many as 10% are estimated to have involved organs that were obtained through illegal channels. According to Dr. Luke Noel of the World Health Organization, and the real organ harvesting numbers may be even higher. The stakes are so big, the profit can be made so huge that the temptation is out there, he said. Illegal organs and blood generally flow from poor countries in Asia, South America, Africa, and Eastern Europe to more affluent countries such as Israel, Japan, Canada, Australia, England, and the U.S. Although the sale of human organs has been banned in the U.S. since 1984, suspects have been convicted of the crime as late as 2011. Mainstream American physicians universally abhor the influx of black market organs for a variety of safety and human rights reasons. So, there's just another confirmation. And, you know, we've all heard of this as well, like people, there's been stories for I don't know how many years, like probably 20 or more years of people just waking up without a kidney or without something. I mean, obviously there's only so many organs that you have that you can live without. But I don't know. I know that this is happening. I mean, I know that I've heard stories about prisoners in China when they need a transplant. When somebody needs a transplant, they'll kill a prisoner in China if they don't have one available. So whether or not that's true, I don't know, but it's plausible. Now, I'm going to cut there. I'm going to cut right there, and I'm going to come back, but I think I need to cut there because it's going to be too long for anybody to listen to. So I will see you in the next video, and I hope that you stick with me and through all of this red stuff because it's really important. And I will talk to you soon. I appreciate you all. I really, really do. And thank you for listening. Bye.